Black students in schools across the country face challenges every day, but sometimes what seems like a simple mistake can spiral into a life-changing moment. Imagine this. A young black girl sits in her classroom minding her own business when suddenly her teacher decides to cut her hair. Without permission, but this wasn't just any ordinary student. Moments later, her father walked into that classroom, and he was a federal judge. The teacher had no idea that this simple act would set off a chain of events that would shock everyone in the room. What happened next is a story of injustice, surprise, and a lesson no teacher, or anyone, would ever forget. It all happened at a public middle school in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The school was known for its strict policies, and the staff prided themselves on discipline and order. But beneath the surface, tensions often ran high. The girl at the center of this story is Amara Johnson, a bright, shy, and polite 12-year-old. She loved school, especially reading and art, and she had a warm smile that lit up any room. But like many black children, Amara was cautious around authority figures, knowing that not everyone treated her with fairness. Her father, Judge Marcus Johnson, was respected in the federal court system. A man known for his fairness, integrity, and calm demeanor. He had spent decades serving justice, but he was also fiercely protective of his family. On that day, Amara had been wearing her natural hair in neat, loose braids. It was her favorite style, one she had spent weeks caring for, but for reasons that were never fully explained, her teacher, Mrs. Collins, had decided that Amara's hair did not meet the school's hair policy. Mrs. Collins had been under pressure to enforce strict appearance rules, and in her mind, she was simply correcting what she believed was a violation. But she didn't ask Amara, didn't speak with her parents, and most importantly, didn't realize who she was dealing with. The classroom was buzzing with students finishing their assignments when Mrs. Collins stood over Amara with a pair of scissors in hand. "Amara, come here. Your hair is not allowed like this. I need to fix it," she said sharply. Amara froze. "But it's my hair," she whispered. "Please don't cut it." Her protests fell on deaf ears. Mrs. Collins dismissed them, insisting she was enforcing the rules. Some students stared in shock, whispering to each other, while others quietly pulled out their phones, unsure whether to intervene. And then the scissors moved. In a matter of moments, a section of Amara's braids was cut off. The hair fell to the floor like tiny pieces of shattered trust. Amara's eyes filled with tears. She felt violated, embarrassed, and powerless. "Why did you do that?" she whispered through trembling lips. "I'm just following the rules," Mrs. Collins replied, her tone flat, almost rehearsed. The classroom was silent, except for the soft sniffles of a few sympathetic classmates. But the silence was shattered when the door opened abruptly, and in walked Judge Marcus Johnson. He had come to the school that morning for a routine meeting, but decided to stop by Amara's classroom first. At first, he didn't notice the commotion, but then his eyes fell on his daughter, sitting with tears streaming down her face and her hair partially cut. The moment he recognized what had happened, the room seemed to freeze. Even Mrs. Collins' carefully maintained composure faltered. Judge Johnson's presence changed everything. The authority in his stance was unmistakable, and the energy in the room shifted instantly. "Amara," he asked gently, kneeling to her level. She shook her head, pointing to her hair. She cut my hair, Daddy," she whispered. Judge Johnson's eyes narrowed, not in anger at his daughter, but at the woman standing in front of him. "Mrs. Collins," he said, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made everyone hold their breath. "Is this true?" Mrs. Collins hesitated, caught between defense and fear. I was just enforcing the school policy. You cut my daughter's hair without her consent." Judge Johnson asked, the calm in his tone now edged with steel. Yes, she admitted quietly. A hush fell over the classroom. Students stared at the unfolding scene in disbelief. Even the most confident students felt the weight of the moment. They were witnessing a federal judge confronting an injustice right before their eyes. Judge Johnson took a deep breath. "You are responsible for a child's trust and safety while she is under your care. This is not just about hair, it's about respect and dignity. I want this incident reported immediately, and I expect disciplinary action to follow." The classroom felt like it was holding its breath. Mrs. Collins' face went pale. She had thought she was simply enforcing rules, but now she was facing a reality she had never anticipated. She had crossed a line she didn't understand existed. I didn't realize, she stammered, but Judge Johnson's gaze did not waver. It's too late for that now, he replied. Actions have consequences. The aftermath of the incident was significant. The school administration immediately investigated, and Mrs. Collins was put on leave pending further review. Policies were revisited to ensure that no student could be subjected to such treatment again. For Amara, the experience was both terrifying and empowering. She learned that even in moments of injustice, having someone who believes in fairness can make all the difference. Judge Johnson, for his part, emphasized that this was not about power, but about teaching respect and protecting children from unfair treatment. He spoke to his daughter afterward, reassuring her that she had done nothing wrong and that her courage in speaking up mattered. In the weeks that followed, Amara's story became a quiet example in her school of why consent and dignity matter. Teachers were reminded that rules do not excuse disrespect, and students learned that standing up for themselves can make a difference, especially when guided by fairness and integrity. The lesson was clear: injustice, no matter how small it seems, can have real consequences. And sometimes, the people who uphold justice are closer than we think. Stories like Amara's remind us that standing up for what is right matters, even in the smallest moments. Every child deserves respect, dignity, and a safe space to learn. If you believe in sharing stories of courage, fairness, and justice, subscribe now for more real, life stories that inspire and shock, just like this one.